And welcome to the Filmstein Podcast, the podcast where we are challenged with trying to articulate a love for art and storytelling. Today I'm joined by my historical friend, Lucy.
Hello, everyone.
I'm glad everybody could join us today. Thank you guys very much for being here, because today we will be talking about Robert Zemeckis' 2024 release here. And oh boy, is there a lot to talk about. I just wanted to start off by saying that I love the sentiment of making a film like this, having this idea in your head, watching the Ghost Story, or whatever that David Lowery film is, where the man is in a sheet and he's living through time, especially from the point of view of the history of what happens in a house. Robert and I share, I guess, a similar feeling when walking into an empty house and just thinking about, especially an older one, and thinking about what went down here, what kind of history this house has, what kind of fights happened, who grew up in this house, was anyone murdered in this house? I think most people connect to houses they grew up in, they lived in for some period of time. They wonder about their old house. They go check it out, maybe. There's an interesting idea around capturing that history, but I don't think it's this film. And I say these things, and it's clearly the major focus of the film, not the only focus. But then Zemeckis shows us dinosaurs. He shows us Native Americans and Ben Franklin's bastard child. And also these inventive type folks, hippie type folks. He invents the lazy boy. That's my favorite part of the movie, actually. Wish we could have got more of them, I should say. And we also get this weird modern family. And I guess it does play off the what was here. Were there Native Americans here? Are there arrowheads in the backyard? Did you know Ben Franklin's estranged child lived across the street? Did you know that this house is going to go on to be another family's house? Maybe it's a bad thought to want to capture some of that history that happened in a particular location, especially in an anti-dramatic fashion, through not moving at all until the very end. And I might be a little hyperbolic in saying that when the camera finally picked up, I was like, oh, thank God, this is it, we're done, we're over. It's not that much of a drag or anything, but I did kind of have this relief of something, like something's happening now. Because it's a great example of this film is how important movement is, and just how awkward action can be without the camera kind of complementing it in some way. It's kind of funny, though, because I'm a little higher on this movie than I may come across, too, because I still love the sentiment of capturing some of that history that happened in a house. That is such an attractive idea, but maybe it is just that sophomoric college project and should stay that way. Should stay that short film kind of thing, right? Not an hour and a half plus. And I think it's very clear he gets a little out of control. He loses focus because dinosaurs, Native Americans, even going as far as modern black problems. And it's kind of antithetical to the major focus in that we're capturing the birth and death of an individual, more or less. But I don't know. You're the bigger Zemeckis fan here, I think. Do you agree or not? What do you think of here?
I definitely have a lot to say about this movie. I'll start off with, I've never seen anything like it for sure. I know I love to bring Darren Aronofsky's The Whale as an example of camera work and that confinement to a singular room, a singular space. And the camera here stays confined to a single spot in space and time. And there's something cool there. I agree with you. Some of that history that happens in a space, in a house where you've lived, it's a cool idea. It's a cool concept. And here in this film, it almost made me feel something. Because thinking about your living room having potentially been roamed by a weird creature years and years ago is pretty cool. Nonetheless, a very interesting concept. But is it effectively done? And it's just not for me. or does it completely miss the mark? Time is a big theme. It's a big concept. It's too broad. It's difficult to show passage of time effectively and keep your audience engaged and make your audience care. One of the things you and I share in film are those stories and narratives that are pretty tightly focused. And this film seems the opposite of that. Because there's a reason a tight focus works. A tight focus gives you the opportunity to tell an effective story with a so what. It gives you a chance to say something meaningful and gives a director the chance to play with motifs and symbols and dialogue and imagery and have characters and develop them.
Yeah, I was going to say, and have character, right?
Exactly. And one of the things that I really appreciate about a film that is so tightly focused is that it gives you a chance for self-reflection. Because time passing by, time flying by, is no doubt one of the biggest concerns we have as humans. But why did I not care? Why did I not feel any kind of impending doom or any kind of reflection on my time on this planet like I'm supposed to? Or I think I'm supposed to. We not only play with time thematically, but we also have this weird non-linear narrative, if you can call it a narrative, and what seems like a 1 hour and 44 minutes time lapse. This movie is an experience, and I don't know if I can say it was a very fun one for me. It's good for Zemeckis here to explore and try something different, because a lot of his films tend to have action that moves the plot along. They're not very character driven, but someone is doing something, like time traveling, running through America, or being stranded on an island. So I'll give him some kudos there, but maybe he didn't know what to do with a film without a main character, a main purpose, without taking a person from A to B to C the entire film. And with that being said, I don't know how I feel that the through line of the film, the purpose to the title, the point to the many different stories told, which, by the way, none of those stories are shared or interwoven somehow, because here is the room. Here is the location. The here is literal. We're just here, in this point, in this space, in this time. But then here's where I get confused, because the thematic purpose starts to contradict itself. The human experience doesn't matter, right? People just pass through time and we lose any individuality or personality and the connections to each other. At least what I watched, what I felt. But then at the same time, the human experience is all that matters, right? Because we all feel the same things throughout life: grief, love, anger, fear, and regret. Our lives do matter. We're all connected, is what I'm being shown. Does that make sense?
No, I think so. It's kind of like how history books trivialize what happened, intentionally so to make it digestible. We can't know all the texture and details of the affairs of George Washington or how Russia was founded, you know? That's kind of what ultimately allows people to get their PhD or whatever, do some kind of dissertation on X, Y, and Z to dig into the texture. But the history books leave that out because it's largely irrelevant.
And not the point to a history book.
Right.
But in this film, he definitely is trying to say something.
Right. You would think it would be much more like a ghost story where it's entirely objective. There is no point. And that is sort of the point of the movie, being that there is no point to anything. But here we kind of have a main character.
True. But I guess my main point is that we not only have a focus story, but we also have all these other stories being told and spending time with them, and similar things happening to our main story as the other stories. Where's the connection? I know you mentioned The Lazy Boy, and these stories have the potential to be fun Because one of the things I do love about Zemeckis is his humor and his appreciation of American history. So I do like the inclusion of the lazy boy, the wars, Benjamin Franklin and his son, but we don't do anything fun with it. And Zemeckis really shot himself in the foot here, because how can he make an unreliable character like Forrest Gump take us through time and show us American history in the most fun and creative way, and still be able to make beautiful connections, human emotions, and the relationships we can all have with each other? Did he try to do that again here? I don't know, because there's no perspective in this film. I'm sorry, a house is not a perspective. It makes everything feel so detached. I was trying to think of what I would categorize this movie just to help me really understand what I'm experiencing. And the best I got is a slice of life film, but on steroids. Like, let's explore all these slices of all these lives without a story and smash them together in an hour and 44 minutes. The film felt very stage-like for many reasons. There was a scene in the beginning of the film where the realtor was selling the house to Al and Rose, the parents, and she started tapping the floor with her foot to show them how sturdy the floor was, with it still being an old house. But the way she tapped her foot made her look like she was about to start tap dancing. And then seconds after, Al, the dad, starts shouting his dialogue. Yes, we discover that he's got some hearing issues, and that's why he's yelling. But just that entire interaction, that entire sequence just felt very, here we are, and here's the house, and, you know, like she was about to start dancing. It felt very weird. And I could go on and on about all my issues with the film. The pacing. I, like you, got some relief when the camera started moving. I was excited it was over. The performances. The characters. Like you said, the diversity inclusion just for diversity's sake. The transitions. Can we talk about that? I'm not sure what you call that. Those little squares that transition the spot from one place to the other. It was a cool party trick the first few times I saw it, but then it got old because it kept happening. I'm so excited to unpack all this with you, especially the ending as well. And I'll just end my introduction here with, you're right. There's a reason cameras move around in film.
Yeah, even in a movie that is objective and nihilistic as a ghost story, the camera still moves around. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. I suppose asking the question, wondering the thought of what happened in this house, what happened in this yard, is not too unlike asking the question around a magic trick of how they did the trick. It's not a real question. You don't want to know. You know, it's a good wonder, good mystery, but you don't want to think too deeply on it because you're going to be completely underwhelmed or turned off, even.
And I like something that you said earlier about as you grow up, you kind of wonder what happened to your old house, and maybe you take your partner, your spouse, to go see it and tell them some stories, exchange some childhood memories. And you said the key word there, sentiment. Where is that sentiment here that any of these people feel, that any of these people should have felt? I want some kind of connection to the film. Is this not a connection type of movie?
No, the connection to this film is completely predicated on the experience of having grown up in a house, having been part of a house for so long that you were able to connect to it yourself, and then yearn for it. Think about it. Remember it. But the important part of that phenomenon, that experience, is the one experiencing it. We have no connection to this house, right? The only person who has a connection to this house is Richard and his family. Maybe it would have helped if Richard was wondering about what happened in this house. If he was somehow invested in the history of this house, in the neighborhood, Ben Franklin, you know, but we're constantly pulled away from the central story, Richard's story, his birth, upbringing, adulthood, children, death of his parents. And then, of course, you're thinking, well, these jumps in time, which are ridiculous, I'm maybe finding out I'm really not a fan of films that, or the tendency, the technique to break chronology in this fashion. It's just bizarre and jarring and distracting. It wasn't very confusing. I knew exactly where I was and everything, but it's just like this, what is the point? Because you quickly realize there is no mirroring, there is no reflecting, there is no echoing. It's just the fact that other things happened in this house.
Well, and that's where my confusion lies, because there is an attempt at echoing and mirroring with these things that we all experience as humans. All the stories had somebody die. All the stories had someone fall in love.
I mean, that's a good point, but it comes back to that point of the history book. It trivializes all these people's lives, which I get in the grand scheme of time, the last 100 years, and, whatever large scale of time. From a bird's eye view, it does look trivial because everyone experiences death. Everyone experiences babies. Everyone experiences going to college or someone going to war or to the military. Fighting parents. Divorcing parents. Christmas. Birthdays. Whatever. And maybe it's a Zemeckis problem, because I definitely think the action, writing, directing, blocking is all kind of bad. So Zemeckis is mostly to blame here. And it's kind of funny that you bring up Zemeckis normally has a main character. I mean, I guess every filmmaker has a main character normally, or an aunts type thing. But one thing Zemeckis is kind of bad at is his characterization. A lot of his characters are cartoons, which is fine. I think that is probably one of Tom Hanks' strengths. So I think that's why you often see Zemeckis working with someone like Tom Hanks. But of course, Zemeckis, I think, normally can use that also to his strength, because the character and relationship is generally not the focus, not the point of the movie. But here we have no characterization. It's just ants moving around in their ant farm. And apart from the predation of us connecting to, I've been there before. I've thought about my house that I lived in for a long time and had all these experiences. And besides that predation, the film's predicated on someone just being born and growing old, which is sad in kind of an objective way and can be really sad if you actually make them characters worth living with. But the film is chock full of half-hearted relationships, something Zemeckis, I think, tends to ignore because he knows he's not very good at directing and writing real dynamic situations between people. He's not a dialogue man, right? It's like you said, he's very action-oriented.
Yes.
And the closest thing he's probably gotten to a real character, not real life, but like a real developed character, is probably Chuck from Castaway, and simply because of, what Zemeckis put him through. He put him on an island, he's like, all right, you're going to be here for 4 years, learn something. He learned how to make a fire.
I definitely agree with you on some of those points. Zemeckis' strong suits are his thematic elements. What he wants to say. Does he always say it? That's a different question. But he knows what he wants to say. And he keeps these traditions in his film that I very much enjoy. These almost 80s elements that I really enjoy in film. He has to make his characters go through something physically. So he has a lot of action in his film. No problem there. And his dialogue is hilarious, and it's used just to drive the plot along. No problem there. But I don't see any of these elements in this film. He completely loses any of the charm he has in his movies.
I like that you bring up these squares, I guess rectangles, probably a few squares. I like the transition a lot.
It was so distracting.
It was so overused. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This is a great example of this man not knowing what he's doing. If you want to ponder the question of what happened in this space and then prognosticate what happens in that space, use these squares. I love it. But the squares are the hyper time lapse of getting from the dinosaurs up until Richard's parents buy the house. That's where all the squares are used, and it's fast. 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes maybe. I know he wants to spend some time on it, so spend a little bit of time on it. And then when Richard and Margaret sell the house or whatever is happening, we have another bookend use of the square transitions with that next family coming in and buying the house, and then the family after that, and then maybe the house gets demolished or something, and then aliens. I don't know if you want to go real crazy. That could have been really fun, potentially, but he just insisted on using the squares for every single transition. Like, it would have been better if it was just a hard cut between them, and then you kind of have to regain your bearings, maybe to the effect of Memento or something. It wouldn't be that confusing, I guess, but spending 10 minutes with Richard and then 5 minutes with the lazy boy guy and then 10 minutes with Richard and then 5 minutes with the Indian dude.
No, I definitely agree. It was way overused, way distracting. There was one time that I got a kick out of it, and I think it was when we were with...
the lazy boy guy.
No, it was when we were with the Indians, and then the square popped up to show us into the future, and there was a truck that had Mayflower on it. Like, that was the brand of that truck, and that was pretty funny. And that's Zemeckis humor that I'm talking about. And even some of the dialogue had some pretty funny moments, but they were sparse.
I mean, there also was that transition of a leak in the roof, and it transitioned into, I think, Margaret's water breaking.
Yeah, that's not funny. But that was it for me. Everything else was too much, too far. And I tried to think about if there was some sort of symbolism behind these squares, right? Richard was a painter. These are canvas-looking squares. I don't know. I was trying to dig to find something because there was absolutely no symbolism in this film.
Well, there is something to that, I think, but it only continues to trivialize the human experience. To what end, though? It's not an objectifying film when it really should be.
Yeah, and for it to be a proper use of symbolism, you can't use it, over and over and over and over again.
That's fair.
You can't find the deeper meaning there.
It's crazy. I was way more invested in the lazy boy guy, and when he was calling it the relaxee or something like that, I was just waiting for the moment that I don't know who was going to make the change, if it was going to be investors or, his wife or whatever. And then it happened. I was like, that's it. I'm good. I can turn the movie off at this point.
Oh, no. I'm in agreement that section, that couple, I guess, was the best part of the movie. And I think their set, the props and all of that were the coolest. That was a very intriguing room to look at, where everything was located. Even the girl felt more natural behind that camera than our main characters did.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the only real standout here is Richard's dad.
Yep.
Paul Bettany. He probably should have just been the main character, and we just experienced one life in this house. But then again, I guess that would have been antithetical to the point of trivializing the many lives.
Yeah, that's still confusing to me, because then why even have a focus on Richard and Margaret and their story?
No, I'm totally with you. It should have been chopped up probably a little more evenly. At least between the pilot, the lazy boy guy, Richard, and the modern family. And maybe there's some effort here, and I just am not on the same wavelength of Zemeckis, but where is the mirroring? it's kind of a tired point, but forcing us away from whatever little focus you have needs to come with some juice. There needs to be some kind of parallel, some point to it.
Right.
If not, it needs to become more objective and not so focused on a Richard, right?
How did you feel about the performances here? Was my issue the performances, or was my issue the dialogue? Because the dialogue felt very forced, over the top. That's also what gave me the stage vibes. Of course, the camera not moving added to that. There was nothing additive in the dialogue whatsoever. And one thing you mentioned earlier that I completely agree, Tom Hanks, whether you like him or not, has this character to him. He has that voice. He has those movements. He has those exaggerated movements to him. Everything he does in Forrest Gump, of course, screaming Wilson, and there's none of that here. So why even have Tom Hanks? And also to that, how did you feel about the de-aging?
As far as dialogue, this film may be another great example of of what not to do. It's very much like trying to put some kind of sensible compilation together of high points or very low points in a family's life. It's going to end up being completely senseless. And of course, when you're watching a series of home videos, you have an inherent deeper connection. They're probably of you or a loved one. So what's being said doesn't matter. And I think that's an important part here, that what's being said isn't supposed to matter because of the objectifying nature of the film.
If your dialogue doesn't matter, then you need to have a movie like A Ghost Story.
Yeah, with less dialogue.
Exactly.
Yeah, the only real dialogue in A Ghost Story is when that guy at the party basically tells you the point of the movie. And that's it. But it's kind of funny because the high points and the low points come with the performance of just who we are. The drama. The theatrics. But it's hard to care when you don't care about the people. And it's kind of a rock and a hard place situation maybe, where it's hard to care about these people when we're seeing so many people and we're not supposed to really care about anyone. But it's also hard to care when the dialogue kind of sucks, the performances or whatever, completely non-additive at the very least, neutral. So every high and low point just is kind of confusing in one way or another because they're also not really tied to anything else in the movie. Like if they echoed each other throughout the different chronologies, maybe we could find ourselves in this film a little bit more and it could be kind of predatory towards that, manipulative towards that, which would be fine. But then you're going to have to find those very generic human experiences, like someone dying in your family. That's something that's going to happen to everyone at some point, right? Having a drug addict son or something, maybe not that, because not everyone has a drug addict family member. But to your point, as far as performances, there's just so little to work with here that it's just like, why? Richard's dad is decent. The yelling, I kind of liked when they were showing the house off and stuff. I wish it would have stayed theatrical, but it gets kind of boring and home movie because that is sort of the point of just showing us a compilation of experiences in the house, right? I wonder if they would have established the house a little bit more with a bunch of still shots maybe. Of maybe when Richard's dad and mom were first looking at the house, we got a bunch of still shots following them around the house to kind of get a layout. And then when we got comfortable and they were like, we're going to buy it, that's kind of when we locked in. You know what I'm saying? Something along those lines. Still real static, but it's still really focusing on all the stuff that happens in the living room. You know, because yeah, a lot of stuff happens in the living room. Okay. And as far as this de-aging, I know it's like a kind of a hot topic, controversial thing across movies and the rest of the CG. There are times, especially when we're kind of close to Robin Wright and Tom Hanks. It's a little weird, especially in the eyes. It's a little weird, I think. It's not something that I would want to get close in on as a filmmaker. I'd want to keep that, I want to stay 15 feet away from that because it's hard to do, obviously, and very expensive to do it right. And I'm not sure if I've ever seen a de-aging done all that right. I guess as long as it's not very distracting, it's good enough.
Yeah, there were so many issues with the movie that I don't know if that was an issue for me with him being so stiff.
Yeah, there's a lot wrong with it, and I think that's probably one of the last things that is wrong with it.
Yeah.
And even the use of CG when we see the greenery and whatnot and stuff, and when we pull out of the house and everything, it's really not bad. I was kind of surprised to see so much CG because of the famous thing with the feather in Forrest Gump. It's one of the crazy practical blended with CG kind of moments.
Not Lieutenant Dan's missing leg.
I mean, that's pretty good too. I mean, it looks great, I think. And the only time it kind of stuck out to me was literally the very end when this hummingbird came across the screen. I was like, oh,
yeah.
That looks rough.
I felt that.
But again, it's really not a big deal. I will say CG, I mean, it needs to be digestible. It can't be like, what is going on, But, I mean, that's kind of the problem with some CG, like a lot of Marvel CG, where there's such a lack of depth with really high quality CG sometimes that it's just like, I can't really tell what I'm looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Marvel deals with that quite a bit. So all in all, CG de-aging, on the growing list of problems, it's probably towards the bottom. I think Zemeckis is the first problem.
Zemeckis is a problem in this movie. He is not the problem.
I will say, too, I like your point of Zemeckis' interest in time. I don't know if he's got time themes in all of his movies. I'm not a Zemeckis scholar by any stretch, but you do see it quite a bit, and it's kind of maybe telling. I'd like to see a Zemeckis film in his old age now, interested in what it's like to grow old.
Oh, yeah.
But yes, the Back to the Future, of course, jumping through time. Forrest Gump, remembering throughout time, showing us history. It's very cool. Even Castaway, where he spends 4 years on an island, and Kelly moves on immediately.
Yeah, and even the classic Christmas story about time and regret and memories. A Christmas Carol.
And Polar Express, because it's kind of a Narnia situation, right? Where he gets on the train, it's Christmas Eve, right? When he leaves, and he's gone for days. And then when he comes back, no time has passed. Stuff. So he's got a fixation of what drives him in filmmaking. I appreciate that, no doubt. I will also add, I guess, in Zemeckis' defense of wanting to make a film mostly focused on the objectification, the kind of history book nature of wondering what happened in this house, this old house. And picking a room, I guess, just to kind of defend him. The living room makes sense.
Yeah.
A lot happens. Establishing the house probably would have helped. Even though we never go back to the master bedroom or the kitchen or whatever, the backyard. Letting our imagination kind of fill in the blanks of when two people are yelling at each other or when someone runs across the house, we kind of get a gauge of where they are still. Make it a small house, 800, 1,000 square feet.
No, that's a very good point, because at the end, when we're finally shown, I guess, the other side of where we were filming, it felt jarring.
I was like, oh, that's the kitchen back there.
Yeah,
I mean, that makes sense,
exactly.
But I was like,
exactly.
I was curious to see. I couldn't wait until the camera turned around and for the movie to be over, but
I don't even know what happened. I just know I saw the rest of the house, or at least the kitchen. Yeah. I want to talk about a scene that happens in the movie, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. I guess I'm not sure how I feel about this entire movie. But it's the scene where it's her 50th birthday. There's a surprise party or something, and they put the cake all awkwardly in her faces. And she gives this speech about, I never made it through law school. I never visited Paris in the spring. I put things off, blah, blah, blah. I always say next year. I don't want to do that anymore. And Richard's just like, blow out your candles.
And then she's like, I want a divorce.
And then in the next scene, yeah, basically. And the scene really stood out to me because it felt like a pivotal point in the movie. It didn't feel like one of these things that just happens in life. You regret, you grieve, you divorce. It felt like Zemeckis was trying to say something here about regret, be careful what you do with your life, a cautionary tale. I don't know. I'm curious how you feel about this scene and just how distracting it was even more to the entire point of the movie. It's almost like in Castaway, the end, where he has that one piece of dialogue and now Zemeckis is trying to say something else with the movie.
Yeah, it plays into this point of contradiction that you mentioned earlier. And I mean, it goes without saying that movies, storytelling, art in general has a point most of the time. Most things aren't just there to solely entertain, especially out of a thoughtful storyteller. And this film, like the therapy scene, does seem to suggest something more. But then you remember that this film is sort of nihilistic in a really boring way. I like to say that nihilistic characters in movies tend to be bad characters, boring characters. Nihilistic directing and storytelling is maybe even worse, because obviously the film does suggest a primary interest in Richard's life, right? It's just like, what's the point though? Well, there is no point, and it only kind of, I want to say confusing, but it's not all that confusing, because again, it is kind of just the high and low points of these people's lives. And then I'm just kind of reminded that it's presented in this way to just trivialize the human experience.
And see, maybe that's where my confusion lies, because I don't think it's just trying to trivialize the human experience, especially with this being a Robert Zemeckis film. Not that everything in his filmography needs to have a connection or reoccurring themes or anything like that, but that is the man's signature.
You're only kind of justifying in my head this point I made earlier about using the squares to have a fast time lapse of the dinosaurs to before Richard's family got there, and then using that same technique after Richard leaves, because it's a much more romantic approach to all this stuff happens in this place, in this space, in this house, across time, but we're going to put this family under a microscope.
And then the end of the movie comes. Margaret has some sort of dementia, Alzheimer's. We saw it coming. She kept forgetting stuff. We didn't see the decline of her illness. I wish we would have. That would have hit harder. And then she says, I love it here. After they sit down and he tells her these stories that happened. That's where you gave birth. That's where I caught the thing on fire. That's where we had the Christmas tree. But she says, I love it here. After the entire film, she spent trying to get away, trying to find a new place, regretting her life, divorcing this man, being semi-jelly of her daughter, which, by the way, was one of the worst characters in the film. So it, again, further confused me on what is the point of this movie. And not only was I thinking about what the heck did I just watch, and I'm glad you brought it up, we see that weird hummingbird and that pan out of the house. And I end this film on a bad note.
It's just as confusing when Chuck from Castaway is at his crossroad and he's like, well, you never know what the tide's gonna bring in. That's not what this movie's about. I'm just gonna tell you that right now. Margaret saying that implies this, montage of home videos kind of thing. We've been with each other through thick and thin, and I'm appreciative of it on some level, right?
Yeah, that would have made sense for Rose to say that. The mom. She was there from the beginning, raised her kids there, appreciated all the Thanksgivings, the Christmases, the whatnots, letting her son and his girl live there and bring up their child there.
No, that's a good point, because of just our bad positioning, the bad direction and vision of this movie, it suggests that Margaret complains a lot.
Yeah.
That she wants out of this. You know, when you are watching a movie and you see the dad with a beer in his hand every time, that suggests that he drinks a lot of beer. That suggests he's maybe an alcoholic with another accoutrement of some bad decision making. Not to say drinking beer is a bad decision, but it's aligned with building a certain kind of character.
Right. It is in film.
Margaret complains. That she just complains. In all the home videos that we're seeing, she's just a complainer. Right? Yeah, Rose is this very appreciative, very loving mom. That's just who she is. And then we probably get the most development, I guess if you want to call it, with Al. And that's just probably by virtue of spending most of the time with him, at least in some capacity, because he's there when he's younger. He has Richard. He's there when Richard's old too. So we see him as a excited dad, impatient dad, drunk, dying old man, you know, kind of thing. But yeah, man, I'm with you with this Margaret thing. It is a moment where Zemeckis was making this movie and he forgot what it was about. Just like Castaway. Because kind of to your point, it's especially confusing when this is when the camera moves. Like, this is what we've all been waiting for. Excuse me? I will also add to your point of bringing up the whale. It is such a great example of the potential of maneuvering around a small location, an apartment of probably less than 800 square feet. I would say Charlie's apartment is. It's not quite the same thing. Obviously, we're moving a lot around Charlie's apartment in the whale. But you would think that Zemeckis would watch The Whale or something like it and realize, at least on a visual storytelling level, that it is fundamental to just keeping audiences engaged to make these shots interesting, you know? I get there's this element of the home video where it is just boring set designs but we did see a really striking set with the lazy boy guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Of course it was cluttered and whatever, but it felt lived in. Not to say Richard's house didn't feel lived in, but in general there was nothing special captured with where we placed the camera. I almost wish at least the film that we got was kind of captured in different filmmaking techniques, like the dinosaur one was captured in a little bit more of a documentary style. The pilot guy was maybe a little bit more, you know, James Stewart, black and white kind of thing, Harvey, whatever, just to get some kind of visual variety. But I don't know. I want to like this movie more because I love the question. But it's, like I said, I think you don't want to see how the magic trick is done because it loses all of its pizzazz.
Yeah, I think adding those elements would have been distracting for me. As distracting as those rectangle transitions? I'm not sure. But it would have completely lost any of the messaging. Not that we had a lot here to begin with.
Well, man, thank you very much for watching this movie and talking about it here today.
You're welcome.
Do you have a budget guess?
After Castaway being 90 mil, I don't feel confident on my budget guess at all. I'm going with 65 mil just because this is an hour less. The camera's not moving, so I'm assuming that's got to be cheaper, right? But then we introduce a lot of the CG. I'm not sure how expensive that can get. We don't have many moving pieces. We don't have an island, a plane crash. So I'm going 65.
Well, it says here that it was 45 to 50 million, so you're in the pocket. And it went on to make $15.8 million, so it was a definite bust.
Did this have a theatrical release?
Yes, it actually went to 2,647 theaters, and approximately one person saw this film in each of those theaters. And over on Letterboxd with 109,000 people, they weighed in at a 3.0.
That's very average. I'm curious if that average is a bunch of highs and a bunch of lows, or if people just feel average 3 about it. I don't think this is the lowest score I've given, but I don't give 1s very often, and I'm giving this film a 1. This film made me feel nothing besides confusion, and not in a good way. With a film covering time and the passage of time, and one day I won't be here, yet you made me feel nothing? That's not okay.
Yeah, it didn't even do a very good job making your life feel small.
Yes.
When I feel like that was sort of the point.
Probably the best film that has made me feel like I'm just a freaking dot that will end is M. Night's 2021 film, Old. That movie gave me some of the most anxiety a movie has given me about my impending doom. How did this movie not give me that? It's crazy, because you would think it would. At least some kind of pit in my stomach. Gave me nothing. That right there already marked it down pretty low for me. I need a film to make me feel anything, even entertained, or happy, or sad, or even watching it with somebody and they're having a fun experience. None of that happened for me here. There's no narrative for me. There's no story for me. The performances were bland. The pacing had me just ready for this movie to end. I want more from Tom Hanks than this. More expression out of him anyway. The only reason this even has a 1 is because of the concept. The idea is there. It just would need to be a completely different movie. Something like this should have some sentiment, something personal. Even a film about Zemeckis' childhood home and how he felt about it would have been better. I would have felt at least some of the passion he put behind that. A movie with these themes make you have some of the most self-reflection that I did not have at all. And I don't think I need to be older than I am to reflect on my life. Maybe I do. I don't know.
This should have been such an easy, good kind of manipulation of making us feel very small, but making us feel proud about what we've done, what we've been through. Going through time rapidly before and after, but putting Richard under that microscope. That life has meaning. That life isn't trivial. But then we have Richard and his brother, I think, wearing Ben Franklin costumes, which is funny on one level, I guess, because Ben Franklin's estranged son lived across the street at one point, but it just continues this thread of trivializing human history, even in the smallest of corners, their most rejected of corners. We have this random hippie dude showing up with a couple of students looking to dig for Native American stuff in his backyard. Again, no reverence to the people who lived there before, just looking for their stuff, right?
And I would have been fine with that just because it was Rose that got to experience that and she actually loved this house. If the ending was about Rose loving this house.
And see, that's where that kind of microscopic view of this family could have really played some things up, but even the kind of microscopic view we get of this singular family around Richard, his parents and his family, we completely lose sight of the reason we're kind of here to begin with, which is Richard's parents. And then we stick the landing with, we don't stick much of a landing, but we stick with Margaret appreciating this space all this time. And I guess she's got Alzheimer's, she's confused, but I guess Zemeckis, by the time the film ends, hopes that we have Alzheimer's. So coming off the film, I was kind of high because I also love the premise. I love the sentiment, I love the question, but I too asked the question of, how do you do that magic trick? I used to like magic, and then I learned how to do some of it, and I don't like it anymore. I don't care about it, I don't dislike it, but I am completely unamazed by magic tricks now, because I've seen behind the curtain. I knew walking into this episode that I am going to open my mouth and talk my way out of a remotely high-ish score for this film. I was sitting at a 2 right after the film. But I knew the moment I started talking about it, it was going to drop dramatically, because a lot of things clearly don't work. I'm especially susceptible to a film like this, I think, because I've lived in so many houses that I have a lot of memories in a lot of different spaces.
And that's kind of ironic because this is a movie of where someone grew up and funny. Died. Yeah.
But after talking with you here today, I'm probably with you on a 1. Maybe there's a 1.5 in there, but it really is just the premise. Everything gets in the way in this film. Everything. We don't have the middle section of the film like Castaway, where it's pretty excellent, actually. It's kind of surprising. I'm like, maybe Tom Hanks isn't a bad actor.
Oh, did you not see Forrest Gump?
I did. I like Forrest Gump a lot, too. He's great in Forrest Gump.
Stupid is as stupid does.
You got any biscuits in there? So, a 1. So I'm thinking I'm aligned with you. A 1. A 1.5, maybe if I sleep on it, but we will see. It's such a great example of a sophomoric film. A college project. A short film. Or maybe Zemeckis saw a ghost story and was like, I could do that better. I don't know. But yeah, man, thank you again for watching this movie, and thank you guys for listening to this episode of the Filmistines. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Remember, we post every Wednesday and Friday on all of our free feeds for core episodes on YouTube, Spotify, Pandora, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts from. Our next episode will be on the weird little film by Sean Wang, Dee. Came out last year. Very much looking forward to that. I love when Asians come to America and have to deal with American nonsense. So please look forward to that. Remember to leave nice comments, thoughts, and ideas on our Patreon as well. Come subscribe. Come request a movie. We appreciate all the support. Thank you guys very much. But until next time, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Filmistines. Thanks for tuning in and joining us on our cinematic journey. We hope you enjoyed the discussion and gained some new insights and perspectives on the world of movies. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform, especially Patreon at patreon.com/Filmistines. And follow us on social media for more film-related content. We love hearing from our listeners, so if you have any feedback, suggestions, movie recommendations, or book recommendations, please feel free to reach out to us. Until next time, keep watching and keep loving the magic of movies. This is the Filmistines signing off.